Yo, YouTube! It's your boy Premier, back today with another banger, and in today's video we will be going over one of the rarest point guard builds in NBA 2K20, a floor spacing slasher. But before we get too far into this build, Premier Worldwide, I already know you're good for it, but if you're new, smash that like button, drop a nice comment below, subscribe if you're new, and while you're at it, turn those post notifications on. On this channel, we drop daily uploads of 2K content, starting to branch off into Warzone, and your boy is about to start live streaming here on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe if you're new. Now, for this build, go ahead and make a point guard. Handed, of course, jersey number is all up to you. Next, for this skill breakdown, there is a ton of different good skill breakdowns in this game. Some of the better skill breakdowns, look at this one here at the bottom. It's the playmaking and defense and rebounding skill breakdown. That is honestly a demigod skill breakdown. But for this build that we are going to be looking at here today, I want you to look at the skill breakdown with the most shooting and the most finishing. You're going to end up with Hall of Fame shooting and Hall of Fame finishing badges. When you're looking at the point guard position, especially when you're playing Park, Pro-Am, when you're actually playing the point guard position in NBA 2K20, you honestly do not pass the ball a lot. You are asked to score the ball a lot as a point guard, and with this build, you are going to be able to dominate. Next, for the physical profile here on this build, one of the more popular point guard physical profiles is the one at the top, but for this build in particular to be called a floor spacing slasher, I need you to go to the bottom. I need you to look at the physical profile with the most speed, the most acceleration, the most vertical. This build right here at 99.9, and once you have gem rat, is going to be a demi. Next, for the attributes here on this build, there is a certain way you have to distribute the attributes for this build to be called a floor spacing slasher. First things first, go ahead and start maxing out almost all your finishing. Next, for your standing dunk, you can only upgrade this to a 40 for this build to be called a floor spacing slasher. Next, onto the shooting of this build. From here, you can only upgrade the mid-range to a 74. Next, go ahead and max out your three-pointer at an 80. Then you can only upgrade your free throw. If I'm not mistaken, it was at 83. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, it was at 83 for this build. Next, for the post fade, you can only upgrade this for an 87 for this build to be called a floor spacing slasher. In my opinion, there is definitely better versions of this build, but this is how you have to build this build for it to be called a floor spacing slasher. Just like you cannot max out the pass accuracy on this build, only upgrade it to a 79 for this build to be called a floor spacing slasher. Along with the post moves, you cannot get the maximum amount of playmaking badges out of this build, and honestly it does work out, especially when you see what I'm about to do with this build's defensive. Max out your perimeter, lateral, and steal, then upgrade your defensive rebounding to a 64. Oh, I've made a mistake here. You need to actually only upgrade your driving layup to an 85. Any higher, if I'm not mistaken, and it will not be called a floor spacing slasher. And for this build, to get the maximum amount of defense and rebounding badges, you definitely want to go ahead and upgrade the defensive rebounding to a 64. But from here, we are done with this build. Onto the body shape. And hands down, when you're making any type of guard build, there's honestly a few others you could look at, but hands down, the best in the game is defined as the longest arms, the closest shoulders as possible. Next, for the height here on this build, 6'3" is an amazing height. 6'4" is a little tall for this build. I think even at 99.9 you would have trouble speed boosting. And then 6'2" is a great height for this build. I have seen a maxed out 6'2" version of this build at Elite 1. Takeover booster, gem rat, plus with Gatorade. That build at 6'2" is a demi, but for this build I do recommend 6'3". That way you can be the tallest possible in speed boost. Next, for the weight, it is almost similar to the wingspan on this build. It's almost a no-brainer to go ahead and start lowering the weight of this build. 172 pounds gives you the maximum acceleration, maximum lateral quickness. It's just the best weight for this build. But when you're looking at the arms on this build, I do not recommend minimizing them, and here's why. Because when you really sit here and compare this build, if you compare 75 inches and 75.9, the only difference is one extra mid-range attribute. There really is no point in losing a whole inch on your arms for one extra mid-range attribute. I do not recommend that. from here onto the takeover for this build. Slasher takeover is by far one of the most overpowered takeovers in the game. Sharp takeover is also really good when you have steady shooter Hall of Fame, especially when you're a legend and you can afford the extra badge upgrades. Steady shooter Hall of Fame, spot up shooters takeover. Sharp takeover is still one of the best takeovers out there. Since 17, Sharp Grand Badge, it's just a wrap when somebody gets it. But for this build, I ended up going with Slasher Takeover just since this build's called a floor spacing slasher. Honestly, if I ended up making this build for myself, I think for myself, I would end up having to take Sharp Takeover just because I've seen what that Sharp Takeover can do in the comp stage. That Sharp Takeover, if you give it in the right player's hands, is unstoppable. But then the pure overpowerness, especially if you are a less skilled player of the Slasher Grand Badge, is so OP'd. You can literally just drive in and hold X. The Sharp Takeover does take a little more skill, so that is just a debate for you. But yeah, that is all for today's video. If you have any questions on this build, do not hesitate to ask down below. As you can see, we built a floor spacing slasher. This right here is one of the best legend guard builds you can make. It's very balanced. It gets the Hall of Fame shooting, Hall of Fame finishing. Honestly, when you're at legend, you really cannot ask for much more from a guard. Also, real quick before we go, let me know what video you would like to see next. If you're a part of Premier Worldwide, I am officially taking requests. But once again, that's all for today's video. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Make sure to turn those post notifications on. It's your boy Premier, and I'm out. Peace!